Web 2.0.
Innovation.
Trend.
Collaboration.
Software.
Metadata.
Got the world turning as fast as it can? Hear how technology can help, legally speaking, with two of the top legal technology experts, authors, and lawyers, Dennis Kennedy and Tom Mighell. Welcome to the Kennedy-Mighell Report here on the Legal Talk Network.
And welcome to episode 181 of the Kennedy-Mighell Report. I'm Dennis Kennedy in St. Louis.
And I'm Tom Mighell in Dallas.
In our last episode, we took a look at change management. While researching that topic, I noticed that Google searching on change management didn't really bring me to the best information or what I really wanted when I did that search. And then I heard a podcast about a very interesting, well, at least to me, new approach to searching and a tool called Omnity, O-M-N-I-T-Y. I thought it might be a good time to revisit the world of search engines. Tom, what's all on our agenda for this episode?
Well, Dennis, in this edition of the Kennedy-Mighell Report, we will indeed be talking about search engines and how they might have changed since probably the last time we talked about it on the podcast. In our second segment, we'll be talking a little bit about tech gift lists, including our own. And as usual, we'll finish up with our parting shots, that one tip, website, or observation that you can start to use the second that this podcast is over. But first up, we're going to talk search engines. I am finding that about once a month, on cue, Dennis complains to me that search is broken, that Google is no good, and so right on cue, here we are. We thought that it might make sense to confront these frustrations of Dennis's head on and take a look at the current state of internet search engines. You know, in preparing for this, I've got to say, I was a little bored. I find that I get what I need from search engines, so I find that I might be the curmudgeon on this particular podcast. But Dennis, are you sure, really, that before we get started, that the issue isn't more about your need to improve your Google skills than it is about the search engines themselves?
Well, I think that's a partial answer, and I do notice some changes that I do when I'm searching these days. And so rather than do the routine, simple searches, I'm using a lot more of the advanced tools, especially time framing and searching for certain types of documents and using more sophisticated search terms than I have in the past. And I was reflecting on you kind of being bored by this topic, and there's many things that you are overly modest about, Tom, that you'll deflect when I compliment you, but your search engine skills are legendary, and I think even you would agree with that. So I think it's sort of, you know, one of the reasons you're bored with search engines is because you're so good at them. But my contention, or one of my contentions, is that normal sort of search, the simple search, just doesn't really seem to be helpful. And we were talking before about the example of where you're just saying, hey, I just want to find like a list of some reviews that will tell me like the best electric razor to buy. And that seems like it's a lot harder to do these days. So that's one thing I've noticed is that with Google, I'm definitely moving to more of the advanced tools. So I think my search skills always can use improvement, but I think I've done a little bit of work on them.
Well, I have to say, and I don't know about my search skills. I remember when I used to talk about internet legal research, I seem to recall I had a newsletter about that at some point in time. And the thing that I thought that described the way that I look at the internet is what makes it easy to search on the internet is having a good idea of what you're looking for beforehand. And the problem is that, when you try to search now for an electric razor, there's just so much stuff out there. And we're going to talk about clickbait and linkbait and other websites that may not have the level of quality. But I think that part of it is about having a good idea of what's out there to begin with and begin to get a general idea of what you can trust. And that's why, for me, search it's not a huge big deal for me, but part of that's because I don't think that my search requirements are tremendous. A lot of the time I know a little bit about the resource that would have what I need, and I can go right to that site and bypass the search engine entirely. A lot of times I use Google really as a bookmark manager because I can't remember the URL for the site that I'm looking for, so I know exactly what I want, and it's often the very first result. For me, I have to say that when I search on Google, I usually find what I need on the first page. Very rarely do I go to the second page. And frankly, When I do, I think it's because my query probably could be more advanced. I definitely use the date limiter. I definitely search for file types. I find that's very useful. I don't know that I think that's really more a subject of how powerful search has become, giving us the ability to look for those things, rather than the fact that search is more difficult.
Yeah, I think I go back to a conversation I had actually many years ago talking about just the mathematics of search. And so if you use a term like electric razor or change management, I mean, basically we're searching on a database of, I don't know what, bazillions of pages to search. So the mathematics of saying, oh, we're going to come up with an algorithm that finds like the best items on those two words, as you get to more and more pages, you can see how it's going to be less and less successful. So the algorithms change and there's a bunch of different approaches. And so I think that's part of the reason that you want to go to, or I tend to go to, more advanced search tools on Google, some of those advanced search features, I guess. And the other thing is, I also realize, as you were saying, Tom, that I kind of have these other strategies I use where if I might be doing search in Evernote where I've kept a lot of stuff. I might be doing search inside Feedly. I might be doing search of just podcasts in my podcast app, Overcast. So there are other places that I kind of constrain what I have, and then I go into sort of known areas for me, either that I've kind of curated myself or I've done some sort of limited area. So that's one strategy I use. And then I guess to go back to Google, what I've noticed in doing preparation for this is I see things that to me are make it a little difficult for me. I think there is a recency bias in Google. You were talking about your legal research newsletter, and I was tempted to just do a search for that because I think it would be exceptionally hard to find these days because it's an older item. Definitely when you do searches where you see people have done excellent jobs of search engine optimization, you've called that clickbait and other things, but you see that it's results that are not exactly what you want. And then the search algorithms do change a little bit from time to time.
Well, so I'll come back to your recency bias issue, and I'll say certainly all of those, not just recency bias, but search engine optimization and changes to the algorithm, and the fact that the search engines that you use are specifically finding, targeting a specific way of displaying results to you for a particular reason. And you may not know what that reason is. You may not understand what their thinking is and why they show it to you, but I think it's enough to know that that's the possibility that it happens. And so don't take for granted what you see at the top of search results. Understand that there's a reason why you're seeing information that way, and it may be due to a number of different things, not simply because of how you phrased your particular query. But I would argue, in terms of when we get to recency bias, frankly, I would say that I see that as more of a good thing than a bad thing, because when I use Google, I want to find recent information. If I use the date limitation on Google, it's more frequently to say, show me something in the last month or in the last 3 months, so I can get the most recent. If I was looking for the best electric razor, I'd want to know what somebody said more recently to capture all the new equipment, rather than what somebody said a year and a half ago, where those things may be out of stock or obsolete by now. And so I think that date range thing works both ways. It helps you find things current, but it also says, if I want to find research from 1996 or from 2002, I can still do that using that date range finder. And I think that that's a tremendous advancement from where we've been in the past on being able to narrow down specific dates that you might want to find information.
Yeah, and I think that sort of my perception is skewed a bit lately because when you look at our next topic about, tech gift lists. So if you're doing this type of search that's going to give you that information, I really noticed there are a lot of ads. And if you remember back, as I know you do, Tom, that before Google, there was a search engine called Alta Vista, which was really good. But then it sort of just became just full of ads. And then Google came along. It was just so clean and pure and, great results. And I do searches now where I go, oh my God, Google's turning back into Alta Vista. Do you get that sense too? Or is that another one of my overreactions?
I think it's a little bit of an overreaction, but I mean, we have to remember that first and foremost, Google is an ad company, and they've always been an ad company. That's where they make most of their money these days, is from advertising. I have trained my mind around Google's ads, and when I get search results in, I have trained my mind to search out the ad button next to the top search results and automatically skip over those things. I'm just used to doing that. And so I guess I know that, and I've seen articles before where people say that their advertising that search engines sneak in is a little bit more devious than that, and they try and sneak it in different areas. I've generally found, if we're just talking about Google, that they're pretty upfront about it, that they have a couple of ads at the very top. Sometimes they'll put ads off to the side, but they're not trying to trick you into clicking on an ad because they label it right out. Here is an ad. So I think that they, one, they're an ad company, but two, they tell you they're an ad company and they don't try to be tricky about it.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about sort of three trends that I see with Google that to me are really kind of interesting. So one is that I think we're starting to see impact of mobile search on search engines. So think of the different ways that you might do search on a phone as opposed to typing it into google.com on your laptop or desktop. That's one thing. The second thing I think is going to become extraordinarily important is the impact of voice search, which I think gets you to more of a question-oriented approach to search and more of a natural language approach. So I find that I'm starting to, in Google, type in more in the nature of a question, like, what is the best razor for a man? That sort of thing. And so in this odd way, I think you get better results going to that question approach, which, to go back to the old days of search, reminds me of Ask Jeeves. Ask Jeeves.
Exactly.
Is Google is that the best way to do Google, is to treat it like Ask Jeeves? And it could be, because I think that as you use voice more and more, you'll start to have that more conversational approach and do things in terms of questions. So that's another trend. And the third one is one that we've mentioned a bit before, but I sort of have aggressively not allowed Google to do a lot of tracking on me. So I've opted out of those options in the way that it, has the history of my searches and stuff. And I think that probably has a pretty negative impact on some of my search results, and also brings out the point to me is that the search results you get if you and I are both doing sort of the same Google search, I think that unlike what many people might think, is that we probably don't see the same results.
Oh, that's absolutely true that we don't see the same results. And so let me think about all of those things. I kind of have a little bit to say about each one of them. Mobile search and voice search are both huge trends for the future. According to Google, nearly 60% of all search comes from mobile devices, which means where the search goes, then the money goes. And mobile search is going to be a little bit different for you because it's probably going to be more likely weighted to local search. It's going to assume that you're looking for something around you, and so it's maybe weighting itself to things that might be in your area, depending on what you search on. Google is also going to, and I'm just using Google as the example here, is also going to prefer mobile-friendly websites over others, which means it may not be sending you the most relevant results first because of that, because it's being sent to a mobile device. And what I think is really interesting is that Google announced, I guess it was either last month or a couple months ago, that they're actually going to roll out a separate mobile search index that's different from the desktop index and actually more up-to-date than the desktop index. And I think that this is a bet by Google that mobile search is going to be the winner in the long run. I think that's going to be a huge trend. Now, with voice search, I think that, to me, I see a difference. I've always asked questions into it, typed questions into a search engine, and I think it goes back to Ask Jeeves. The difference between typing in questions to just typing them into Google is that Google and other tools with voice search still have challenges understanding the context. And like you say, they're more designed to answering questions and give specific answers and not necessarily a list of results. If I type my question into Google, I can look through the results and see, oh, look, it caught something. It won't maybe not give me the direct answer, but it catches something that is close to the answer. If I'm just going to ask a question to my Echo, or if I'm going to ask my Google Home a question, and I need to absolutely have the right way of asking that question, or else it's not going to know how to answer the question. I think we're still in early days with voice search. It's incredibly powerful, but I think it's still lacking in that you have to know exactly how to ask the right question to get the information that you need. And then I think, you'd asked the question in our prep notes about, is your refusal to let Google track your searches hurting the utility? I think the short answer to that is yes. Obviously, the more stuff that any search engine knows about you, the better it's going to deliver results. There are times that I go back to a search I want to run again, and Google actually always seems to know what I'm looking for. It actually pops up in the autocomplete, the actual terms of the last search that I did on that particular thing. And then I think in broader terms, this is something that you have to come to terms with about search engines, or if we're talking Google in general, that the more Google knows about you, the better. And some people who kind of are all in on Google, I happen to be one of those people. I'm not worried about it. It tends to be more useful to you. If you don't want Google all up in your business, then maybe this isn't an option. But I really like getting a notification that I need to leave in 15 minutes to get to the airport in time, because it knows from my Gmail that I bought an airline ticket for that particular time. I like the fact that it can tell all of this information. I don't feel like it's an invasion of privacy, because some of this stuff isn't particularly private to me. But I think that the same thing is true with the search engine. I think that the more information that you let it have, the more valuable it becomes to you.
And reluctantly, I'm coming to the same conclusion. So the next item we had was Google alternatives. I mean, basically, I just go back to Google all the time, no matter how much I complain. But there are alternatives, and people do experiment with them. So Bing, DuckDuckGo, those sorts of things. But I think ultimately, for the general search engines, it's still a Google world.
Agreed.
So I want to talk a little bit about specialized search engines. And I use, some examples of way I use different search things. And I've always been intrigued. Sort of the one thing about electronic discovery that's always intrigued me the most was the really interesting approaches to search that are used inside the e-discovery tools. So it's things like Dolphin Search from days in the past, use of AI and other things like that, and just sort of really more context-driven search and those things. So I think those tools have always been interesting to me. And so that's what got me sort of really fascinated by it when I heard a podcast about the search tool called Omnity, which is sort of like even a newer trend in that. And so they're going on the notion that if you do machine learning and you're trying to do search on certain terms, there's just too much. You can learn something there, but if you do search on certain terms, there's just too much out there. And so they take this approach where you can do something where you say, hey, I have like a whole document, and I want to find other documents and information that are like my document. So what if I just use that whole document to search off of, and then let their algorithms figure out what's unique about that and some of the patterns in there, and identify other documents, we'll call them our pages on the web, that are really similar. And then what might that tell me? So it's sort of like I sort of abdicate responsibility for crafting this tailored search term, and I kind of let the machine go out and find things for me. And so I'm intrigued by that. There's certain cases where it can be really interesting. So you think of like inventions, patents, things like that, where you say, I want to find something that's like what I'm doing, or to see if there's something like that. So that's intriguing to me. So I was playing around with that today, Tom. And so what I decided, and I'm curious to see what you do, is that one, it's not very fast, that it's really useful, I think, for in certain cases where you're looking for something new, where you're going, I want something similar, but not as a tool where you would do general search, I don't think. And I think it's especially interesting in the patent area. But it's something as a lawyer I might want to keep an eye on as something that could be potentially valuable over time. Tom, your thoughts?
So here's the part of the podcast where I become my most curmudgeonly, but I guess I'm going to put a qualification and say that I still think Omnity is a cool tool. I like the possibilities of it, but I'm going to make the argument that this is not a new trend. This is an old trend with a new spin, because we've been talking about the idea of semantic search and the semantic web for a long time now. And I think that this is a tool that's using new technologies, machine learning, AI, and other tools to improve semantic search and to make it easier to find things. Now, in that respect, I think it's really powerful. I agree with you. It's a little bit slow. I'm glad that it has a free version for the public, although you got to pay more to get more advanced features. And I also agree that it's probably not good for general search, and here's why. I tried a general search on it. I am recently been needing to understand the law in Maryland with regard to lead-based paint disclosures. I did the search in Omnity, and it brought back a lot of really interesting information about what lead-based paint exposure was and some federal rules around it, but not one thing from Maryland, not one. And then I did the search in Google, and literally the first 5 results in Google gave me the information that I needed. So I think that the use case for a tool like Omnity is closer to what you describe than what I was looking for at it. And so that's where it comes back to the idea that you've got to know the purpose for the tool that you're going to use. You've got to know that the scalpel is for something pinpoint and the sledgehammer is something broad. And so as long as you understand the scope and the limitations of each tool, then you're likely to be more successful with it.
So I imported the script for this episode, and there was just a wide range of things that I would not think were particularly relevant. I mean, one thing that was the Wikipedia entry for podcasts, but how useful that really is, I don't know. But when I limited the search to inventions and used another topic, I was going, I could see how this could be really useful, where you're thinking about something and trying to think of things in new ways and saying, I'm not sure what this is like. And so seeing what comes up may kind of stimulate some thinking. So I think it has a certain use. And, it's like any of these other specialized tools. I think you're right. The right tool for the right job is where you want to go. So I guess, Tom, I think that search is important. It's going to be increasingly important as there's more and more stuff out there. But I think that we are all going to have to get smarter about it and realize that there's a set of tools it'd be good to develop that will make sense for each of us. And that's probably been where we've been at for 20 years maybe, but
it's been a while.
But it feels like more so than ever, it's a great time to take a look and say, am I relying on the old tool set that's not really helping me? And maybe it's time to add some new things.
And also what's important is understanding, you talk about how the search engines, especially Google, are more powerful than they used to be in terms of the functionality. We'll put in the show notes a couple of links. Google is really good about teaching users how to power search in Google. And there are a lot of useful videos out there that are helpful. I'll put some links in there. They've got it for both education and just for the average person who wants to learn more about it. Going out and maybe not taking classes, but looking at some videos on how to do this really can help up your search game no matter what tool you happen to use. Before we move on to our next segment, let's take a quick break for a message from our sponsor.
Looking for a process server you can trust? ServeNow.com is a nationwide network of local pre-screened process servers. ServeNow works with the most professional process servers in the industry, connecting your firm with process servers who embrace technology, have experience with high-volume serves, and understand the litigation process and rules of properly effectuating service. Find a pre-screened process server today. Visit www.servenow.com.
And now let's get back to the Kennedy-Mighell Report. I'm Tom Mighell.
And I'm Dennis Kennedy. Well, it's that time of year where you can find tens or dozens or hundreds of blog posts and articles seemingly every day listing the best tech gifts for the holiday season. Now, I like to read those like everybody else and get ideas, but sometimes I get a little frustrated when people just list items that they don't really use themselves, because I'm not really sure how helpful that is to me. I like more of the cool tools approach to these lists. Give me a list of stuff that you like that really works for you based on the experience that you actually have. So even though I'm not like a huge fan of doing my own list and have some reservations about the list I see, I thought Tom and I would go ahead and jump into the game ourselves and list of a few of our favorite items for this year's tech gift list, both the things we like and things we want. Tom, what's the top of your list?
So I'm going to go with, I've got 5 things I want to talk about. I'll try and run through them pretty quickly from cheapest to most expensive. So at the low end, I truly recommend a premium subscription to Todoist, my favorite task manager. I have to say that I recommend it completely, and they now just added a new smart task rescheduler, which tries to use some artificial intelligence of its own to figure out when you should reschedule the tasks that you haven't completed yet. And it actually is scary accurate about how it does that. It's $30 a year. It's really a fantastic task manager. My next one will be the entertainment center that I think is kind of the best overall, and that's the Roku box. If you're using an Apple TV, I'm sure you like it. But if you don't have anything, I really recommend there are several different iterations of Roku. There's a streaming stick that you can carry with you. I take it with me and use it in hotel rooms when I can't find anything interesting to see on TV. I have a box at home, and the number of channels that you can watch and make available is truly astounding. I get to Hulu and Netflix and the majors, HBO and Amazon, but there's old-time westerns and old-time comedies and just all sorts of shows. The prices there are between $30 and $130. Headphones are next. I am right now really enjoying my Jaybird X3 wireless headphones. They're $130. I love having the fact that I don't have to connect anything to my phone when I am walking the dog or when I'm walking around the house, that I don't have anything that's going to catch on anything or worry about the tether. On my wish list, and I'm waiting for them to come out, are the Bragi. I guess that's how you pronounce it, Bragi. They're just tiny little earbuds that are going to be very similar to the Apple AirPods that are on their way out. They're also $130, and I'm looking forward to trying those out when they show up. And then my last one that I want to talk about really is the most expensive, but I've been using my Google Pixel XL phone now for about a month, and it is quite simply the best phone I have ever used. I think that the differences between Android and iPhone in the past has been that iPhones just tend to work just fine, where Androids have the potential to be a lot more powerful and a lot more customizable, but have had performance issues. I think that line has been blurred now, and that this just works. And it's a beautiful device, a little pricey, starting at $650, but iPhones are about the same price, so I think completely worth it. All right, that's a lot on my plate. Dennis, what's on your wish list?
Well, you just remind me I should have the AirPods on my list, at least my personal list. I sort of have a bit of a reading theme this year. So big fan of Kevin Kelly. We talk about him a lot in the Cool Tools website, but just 2 books of his. One I think is just required reading for anybody who listens to this podcast, and it's his new book called The Inevitable, which talks about some really important technology trends. And Kevin also just announced that he's doing like the last printing of the Cool Tools book, which is a couple years old, but God, what a great book with lots of good ideas for tools that work for people. So those 2 books, and then I've become really intrigued by Kindle Unlimited, which is a way that I think you pay $9.99 a month and you get to read a bunch of different things in Kindle. So that to me seemed like a good way to start to consume books as I move more and more into the ebook world. The other 3 items I have real quick are, if you're a presenter, especially, I've really grown to like Snagit, which is this great way to grab screenshots and to do simple editing, cropping, blurring images if you need to blur things on the screen. Really handy tool for anybody who does presentations. Password manager is essential these days if you don't have one. So I like 1Password, and to kind of come full circle to where Tom started, I also recommend a task manager too, which for me is OmniFocus. I paid $99 for it, which is, an unheard of amount for me. But if you're in the David Allen getting things done world, as I am, OmniFocus is just a great software tool to help you keep organized with all the tasks that you have in front of you. Now it's time for our parting shots, that one tip, website, or observation you can use the second this podcast ends. Tom, take it away.
So my parting shot this week is a podcast. If you listen to the Radiolab podcast from, I think that's WNYC, it's a public radio podcast about science. It's a terrific podcast, but they've recently started a new podcast from the same at WNYC that's called A More Perfect Union. And it is a podcast for lovers of the Supreme Court, where they take a particular case or an issue pending before the Supreme Court in history, and they really examine it. And I think that the podcast that got me really hooked was one called Object Anyway, and it was about how the Batson Challenge came about for jury selection, and really the fact that although this was a tremendous decision in Supreme Court history, it may have had a completely opposite effect on how juries get selected these days. So if you are interested in podcasts, interested in listening to news and stories about the Supreme Court and specific decisions, A More Perfect Union is a great choice.
And mine follows the Cool Tools themes. I noticed that Cool Tools, so that's cool-tools.org, they're putting together lists of some of their favorite tools from the year in the form of structured and targeted holiday gift lists. And I look forward to seeing those as they come out. So highly recommended by me.
So that wraps it up for this edition of the Kennedy-Mighell Report. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. You can find show notes for this episode at tkmreport.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to our podcast in iTunes or on the Legal Talk Network site, where you can find archives of all of our previous podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, please email us at tkmreport@gmail.com or send us a tweet. I'm at Tom Mighell and Dennis is at Dennis Kennedy. So until the next podcast, I am Tom Mighell.
And I'm Dennis Kennedy, and you've been listening to the Kennedy-Mighell Report, a podcast on legal technology with an internet focus. Help us out by telling a couple of your friends and colleagues about the podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Kennedy-Mighell Report. Check out Dennis and Tom's book, The Lawyer's Guide to Collaboration Tools and Technologies, Smart Ways to Work Together, from ABA Books or Amazon. And join us every other week for another edition of the Kennedy-Mighell Report, only on the Legal Talk Network.